Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Kaliole Kulona, and this is Nashville. Nashville noticed a significant rise in pedestrian deaths soon after the pandemic restrictions were lifted. People got to work to do something about that. Now trends seem to be moving in the right direction. However, the plan to improve Davidson County's infrastructure is still underway, and safety for those who walk or cycle is not quite guaranteed. What's currently happening to make it safer to walk in our city? Today, we're going to speak with folks who are trying to raise awareness about pedestrians we've lost to reckless driving. And to memorialize those individuals, local activists are placing painted doves around Davidson County. This Is Nashville's Josh Deepan went out to see where these tragedies have happened and where the remembrances will live.
We are currently at the intersection of Dickerson Pike and Sunset Drive, where a pedestrian death has happened on both sides of this intersection. Along Dickerson Pike from 2020 to 2024, there were 20 people that were hit along Dickerson Pike trying to cross the road.
Road safety activists who asked to remain anonymous have begun a guerrilla project to raise awareness about pedestrian deaths in Nashville, placing painted doves marking exactly where fatal strikes occurred.
It's a wooden dove. It is to memorialize Anthony Pompa and him being hit here as a pedestrian trying to cross the road.
He's 43 years old. He's killed in a hit and run.
What commonalities do you notice between all these victims?
I think that the commonality is working class. And, you know, for a city that, you know, prides itself on tourism and being, you know, the volunteer state and being welcoming, we also have to think about, you know, our folks who are actually working in these buildings and making it work. And the closest grocery store you're gonna go to is either you're gonna go about a mile down that way to Piggly Wiggly. You got about another 2 miles, a mile and a half to the Walmart. So, I mean, you see somebody right now on the other side walking in a ditch.
Some pedestrians involved in a hit and run live to tell the tale, like Joan Kite, who was hit crossing Gallatin Pike in 2019 and who's now a volunteer painting the doves.
The car didn't stop. I don't remember it. I was in a coma for 4 months, and unfortunately I did survive and I did come to, but it took me a long time to piece my life back together.
Kite says even after extensive therapy, she still has short-term memory loss from the accident, as well as nerve damage that keeps her from driving.
I hope that people start to see doves along the roadway, and that if they see a dove, they'll think pedestrian.
Basically what I did at first was I rough cut them with a jigsaw, making 100. So it's, they take a little while, but I love woodworking and contributing to the cause, so it's no problem for me.
Nashville native Charlie Weingartner is one of the woodworkers who volunteered to help make the doves, and for him, this project is personal.
I've had so many friends and myself get hit by cars. So yeah, I mean, unfortunately so. I mean, that's just a sad truth of being a pedestrian and being a cyclist.
This is illegal, placing the doves around some of these parts of Davidson County. People may say, well, you're trying to combat crime, but what you're doing might be a crime. Do you have anything you would say in response to that?
Go reread Henry David Thoreau's Civil Disobedience. That would be my suggestion.
Reporting for This Is Nashville, Josh Deepan, WPLN News.
Joan Kite, who was painting the memorial doves in this clip, once survived that hit and run on Gallatin Pike. She's here with us today. Joan has been a guest producer for This Is Nashville, but I'm honored to welcome her now as a guest. Joan, thank you for being here.
I am delighted to be here. Thank you.
Can you tell us about when and where you were when you were hit?
Yeah, it was off the 3600 block of Gallatin where the post office is, and there's a lot of reasons to cross the street from where I was living, and I was heading to Kroger that night, but there's a laundromat, a bus stop, a convenience store, and so like many people, I made the attempt to just cross, which apparently failed. I was hit by a car. I don't remember the accident or the 4 months after the accident, but I'm very grateful that I have survived.
In the clip, it said that you were in a coma for 4 months.
Yes. I actually came to, believe it or not, 15 minutes after the tornado blew through Nashville, and 3 days later, the pandemic hit. So I was at Vanderbilt where I got front row seats to the pandemic. So the whole experience was above and beyond.
In the clip, we heard some of the issues that you're dealing with. Nerve damage, you can't drive, loss of short-term memory. How has your life changed since this moment?
Well, I also acquired the identity of disabled. And that in itself was something I had never dealt with. You know, I'd always been able-bodied. And so suddenly I was in what some might say a marginalized group. And I have learned that sometimes the disabled aren't seen. You know, they're not recognized just by virtue of whatever their disability is. Now, I also carry an invisible disability, which is traumatic brain injury, hence the short-term memory loss. And there was bleeding on the brain during the coma. I got the 1,400-page medical report to read all about it. And that had to subside even before they could think about the other things that needed to be done.
How has recovery been for you?
I am very fortunate, and I know it. I'm employed. I work full time. I had the wonderful experience of being able to work here. It was great. I'm not going to say that there are not times where it's uncomfortable or difficult, but I persevere, and when I had the opportunity, when the project kind of fell in my lap, my landlord called me and told me about what they were doing, and I thought, okay, one of the things that I've taken with me since the accident is a sense of responsibility. That because I survived, I contribute myself to research studies because traumatic brain injury is something that needs to be researched. So I'm sorry, I forgot. My memory just...
I'm with you. You were talking about how because you survived, you're a voice for those who hadn't.
Yes. And so when the project fell in my lap, I mean, the other thing that happened as a result of my accident was Emily Benedict, the council member, got involved, and because too many people had been hit there. And she actually managed to get $250,000 to build a street light there, which I jokingly call it the kite light. But anywho, and so something good, that was the first something good that came out of the disaster. And since then, so much good has come out. And so when this project came into my lap, I thought, how beautiful to do things on behalf of people who can't. And it made me extremely grateful that I could be a part of this. And I believe in the project, and I hope that when people see the doves by the side of the road, that they think, oh, slow down, pedestrian. Somebody died here.
It was a hit and run.
Yeah.
You were in coma for 4 months.
Yeah.
How do you wrestle with the fact that the person who hit you, struck you with this vehicle, potentially may never be found?
Well, I was so busy coming back to life, literally, that I knew that any kind of negative emotion was not to be had. And so it was about rebuilding my life, rebuilding my body. I had to recreate a network of social support because of my new conditions. And so, yeah, all of that is very important to me. And I'm so blessed to be here. You have no idea.
Some people would be bitter and upset and angry, but you chose not to take that path. You chose to focus on positivity and the gratitude for simply being able to be alive.
Right.
What would you say to the driver who hit you if you found him?
Well, like so many in Nashville, where it's a hit and run, I wish, first off, I wish drivers would slow down to begin with and brake when they should. And I see that the mistakes happen all the time on the roads. It's terrible. But then if they actually do hit somebody, to stop. And I understand the mechanics of, well, I just stole this. Who knows what the story was? Just stole this car or whatever. Those people are unlikely to stop. Correct. But I think that the problem doesn't need to be as terrible as it is. I think all people have to do is respect the rules of the roadway and to be alert.
When I moved out here 3.5 years ago, I was told, if you cross the street, make sure you look the drivers in the eye so they can recognize where you were. I was a little bit shocked by that because, again, as you mentioned, people aren't respecting the road. They're not respecting the fact that these are pedestrians and you're driving a car, you feel safe in your car, but that it can quickly be turned into a 2-ton weapon against others. There's been some work happening here in Nashville to improve the situation, but I have to ask you, as someone who is a survivor, are you happy with the direction the city's going in?
I think that all neighborhoods should be walkable. And if that means to get the sidewalks necessary to be laid, to get, of course, now I rely on public transportation, so I'm a big fan of that. But to get all that work done, you have to do whatever is necessary. And if that includes rezoning to create more community in neighborhood, instead of, Dickerson is a busy thoroughfare where people are just passing through, as is Gallatin. Mm-hmm. And I see that the transportation plan intends to turn Gallatin into an access road, and maybe even Dickerson. And I understand that takes time. And the fact that there is work moving forward gives me hope. But in the meantime, what few boundaries we have to prevent the pedestrian from getting hit should be respected.
Might be a weird question, and let me know if it's weird. Do you think if you cross Gallatin Pike today, do you feel safe crossing Gallatin Pike?
Well, one of the things I did when I was released from therapy and had learned how to walk again and everything else was I went back to where I got hit and I pushed that button on that light and I walked across the street and I thought, where have you been all this time?
Joan Kite, thank you so much.
You're quite
for
welcome.
Being here.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I do. I'm glad I'm here.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll speak with a community member who is a part of the Painted Dove Project, commemorating lives lost on the road in recent years. Don't go anywhere. This is Nashville.
Funding for This Is Nashville comes from Burr & Foreman Law Firm, serving clients with transactional, litigation, and regulatory needs. discovering how each client defines a win and working with them every step of the way to achieve it. Burr.com. Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil A. Colonna, and this is Nashville. Today's conversations focus on a serious issue that impacts all of us. We're talking about pedestrian safety and death prevention. You just heard from Joan Kite, a survivor of a hit and run on Gallatin Pike in December of 2019. Thankfully, Joan is a survivor. But we have to keep in mind that not every pedestrian survived. People died, and pedestrians were killed right here in Nashville. So now we're going to talk with someone who was a part of the Painted Dove Project. They've asked to remain anonymous, so we're going to call them George Michael Jackson. George Michael Jackson, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Khalil.
Tell us, what is the Painted Dove Project?
The Painted Dove Project is a memorial for those who have been hit by a vehicle, whether biking or walking as a pedestrian.
Do you... And I know you're anonymous, and I don't want you to divulge any sources or any people or detailed information, but talk to me about the conversations that were had as this project the idea is getting kicked off, as it goes off the ground.
The project started, honestly, due to an injury more than a fatality. Back in 2022, there was a community member in East Nashville who was crossing the street at Shelby and 11th, which is a very dangerous intersection. And they were injured very, very terribly to the point where they did not start working until last year.
Wow.
And so when that particular crash happened, myself and another part of the group, we walked to that site to look at it and to see what could have caused something like this to happen. Mind you, I used to live on 12th and Shelby there for some time before this happened, so I'm very familiar with how dangerous that intersection is. And yet, even fearing losing a dog, that very familiar. Mm-hmm. But going there, seeing how this happened kind of in broad daylight, and how the way that the roadway is constructed almost allows for such things to happen. And when it comes to roadway safety, it is, yes, the infrastructure and the way that the roadway is built, but it also comes with it a mentality of caring for people that you are going to interact with in some way, shape, or form, whether in a vehicle or not.
I'm curious about, as this project has grown, I'm sure people have reached out to be a part of it. You're talking about this dangerous intersection on Shelby and 11th. Just in my experience of driving around Nashville, a little bit of walking around Nashville, and talking to other folks, there are a lot of dangerous intersections in our city. Did you all ever once feel overwhelmed by the number of those?
I do want to correct myself really quick. It was 10th and Shelby.
10th and Shelby. Okay.
Yes. But to further answer your question, my experience, particularly on Dickerson Road, has been one of the more shaking, specifically because walking around the time period that it is statistically shown that these crashes take place along a roadway where there's no sidewalks, that is also a pike. And I can't even tell you, seeing a man and a woman in a stroller trying to cross the street with haste because they don't trust that the car is going to slow down before hitting them. And this is me just walking around and observing what's happening actively on this roadway. Mm-hmm. There were other instances in other roadways, say, for example, Lafayette, where there is a pedestrian hybrid beacon that has been built there thanks to the city. However, due to maybe inconsistencies in understanding how these things work, once again observing how that roadway was operating, we saw two elderly people that almost got hit had they taken one extra step off of the platform because a vehicle was just whizzing down that roadway and didn't stop like the rest of them.
Now, you heard Joan Kite before the break, and just kind of putting a lot of the onus on drivers.
Yes. And I think that personally that it's accountability on everyone. I do have a holistic model in my life and how I address situations. And it is not just the drivers, it is also the pedestrians. And it is on the whole community, really, that we all care for each other just a little bit better and look out for each other. One that really broke my heart was a child down in South Nashville who was hit while her and her mother were in a bike lane. And it just took an extra second for whomever that driver was to have not been driving the speed that they were driving when this family was utilizing what was given to them. But there's other circumstances where we are aware of say, for example, pedestrians and cyclists walking in the street because there's no other option. And they're taking their life into their own hands and they're not given a choice. And it's a gambit either way.
So I want to switch a little bit to talk about the doves that you all use for the Painted Dove Project. Tell me this, why? Why did you all choose doves?
Doves were a choice because of the symbol. The symbol of a dove is used in various situations, whether it be a marriage, whether it be a celebration, generally speaking, or even a death. And I, as a spiritual death doula, focus on fatalities. And so I wanted to kind of use the dove as a metaphor for hope, but also for safety, and how just seeing that dove could give a little bit of hope to maybe the family who lost that person, maybe someone who's been injured, maybe even a person who's learning how to drive, of hope of the streets are safe for me because they weren't safe for someone else. So a hope for the future, as well as peace on the roadways.
Can you describe for us the process of painting them? What's that like for us?
It's been a journey. It's been a journey because since this is something that touches the community, the painting has been a community-driven process. So we've been fortunate enough to work with people like Joan in her church at the First UU in Green Hills, where there actually was a person who died that was a congregate. And they painted with us. A group in North Nashville called Black Mental Health Village. They created an event on Valentine's Day where we all painted as people. I've had some friends that have been wanting to support this group, and even they have joined us in painting. And even some schools. It is something that has been, hey, this is something that matters to us.
Yeah.
Does this matter to you as well? And more often than not, people are saying yes. And it's been very moving.
Do you find it easier for people to recognize that, hey, at some point in time in this city or in the county, you're going to be either in a car or walking? They recognize that this is an issue that really impacts all of us. There's no way you can avoid it.
Absolutely. And I especially, as a member of the group, hone in on the use of the word pedestrian as a general term for all of us, not just for you as a person that doesn't have a vehicle. Because once you get out of that vehicle, what are you? You're not a driver.
Yeah.
And so whether you're a cyclist, whether you're in a wheelchair, even actually when you're in a wheelchair, you're considered a pedestrian. And so I personally would like to expand and apply the usage of that word in the way that it truly takes care of all of us and not just those of us to keep us at ends with each other.
Talk to me about the process of the actual placement of the doves. I'm thinking of something a lot more than just, we think this is the spot, we're going to place a dove here, okay, and let's take off. I have a feeling it's a little bit more ritualistic, a little bit more spiritual.
It has been. Through utilizing the resources that have already been completed. Say, for example, thanks to Walk Bike Nashville and their fatality story maps, and then as well as another member of the group, they through being a computer tech, were able to find a way to create a map that is pulling from the actual MMPD statistics system, and they're plotted. So they're plotted on this map, and I then therefore, because I love maps personally, and so creating a Google map and basically copying and pasting where they're plotted onto this Google map, so that way they can be not only found but also driven to. And the ritualistic process even goes to going to that site and putting it down, and looking at the conditions, whether they've changed since that happened, or if they haven't, and really paying attention to the trends. The map especially, you can see if there's an overlap of clusters, you can see that there was some kind of trend here. Like maybe they were getting off the bus each time that this happened here. Or maybe there's a light that's been out every single time that this happened. It's been not just ritualistic in the process, but also ritualistic in the evaluation of what is actually going on actively and in the past.
If you're just tuning in, this is Nashville, and I'm your host, Khalil Ekalona. This hour, we're discussing pedestrian safety in our city. My guest is with the Painted Dove Project, George Michael Jackson. They place wooden doves commemorating where and when pedestrians were killed here in Nashville. How many doves total do you all plan on placing?
According to the data from the MNPD website, there's approximately 192 pedestrian and bicyclist fatalities since 2020. And we're choosing the 2020 data set to 2024 because in the entire nation, after the pandemic, there was a rise of pedestrian and bicyclist fatalities. And in Nashville specifically, we saw that trend rise as well to a way that we were, one particular year, we were half as many as Memphis. And that, right. So when you are able to see a trend like that happening, it's important to highlight, since the pandemic, we've got some things we need to talk about. A lot of it is driving.
What are some of the commonalities you see in the victims? Earlier in the break, we heard a young man mention that he felt like these were all working class people. Are there more things that put some of the victims in common than that?
It has been interesting to see that a lot of them have been male. It's been also a trend of what age of male. I've been surprised to see some that were under the age of 27. I've seen some that were also older. There's also some groups that are unhoused. It really varies. That there's definitely more male than females, but even still, the overall trend is that it took place where there either was no sidewalk, or there might have been a crosswalk, but they weren't in the crosswalk. Is how a lot of the news stories share it.
You know, grief can be it is a very long and painful process. Have you all found that in commemorating where folks were hit, friends, family members are having a little bit of a difficult time seeing that marker there, if it is potentially in someone's neighborhood? Has someone from the family, let me ask this, how have family members reached out to you and friends of people who were victims? How have they reached out to you about the impact of the doves that are placed around the county?
I'll say we've done more reaching out than we've been reached out to. But the Families for Safe Streets, the Nashville chapter specifically, since this is what they are in existence for, they were particularly moved by this. One of the parents, in fact, doesn't even live here and still was so moved that we would like to send her a dove. The back to the ritualistic aspect of things, we would like to be able to not only put a dove at the site, but also gift one to the families for that grief process. In a way, it's in exchange for your loss, here's something that you can have back. Yeah. And a lot of people more so appreciate that that give back and the acknowledgement, because a lot of the times these things go unspoken and unacknowledged.
Looking at the city and where it's at, there have been a little bit of improvements. As we mentioned at the top of the show, it looks like trends are heading in the right direction, but we still have a very, very serious problem. We've got the transportation referendum that was passed and voted on in November, and that's got a plan. We're going to talk to the director of NDOT coming up in the next segment. Where do you want to see the city grow? And let me ask you, before you answer that, do you feel good about some of these plans that the city has been working on?
I do feel very good about a lot of the plans. I really do. What I would love to see is more of an internalization of everyone, of the importance of being safe, the importance of the signals and the faster service and the safety, not just for the Vision Zero element of the Choose How You Move plan, but also just us as humanity, as we are people together. I would also love to see more people riding the bus. As a transplant, I rode the bus all the time, and I would love for to further answer your question, the growth. I would love to see less stigmatization of the bus and more ridership on the bus, because once there's less cars on the road, then we can talk about maybe less deaths. Then we can maybe talk about other various things.
You know, looking at Metro City and governments, these organizations who are part of straightening things out, getting us right. I'm looking at people who are driving too fast on the roads. I see it all the time. And honestly, full transparency, I've done that myself, you know?
Same.
Where does MNPD come into this? I don't see a lot of people getting tickets. I've seen some crazy moves in front of officers myself. People using the middle lane as the turn lane as an actual lane. What would you like to see as far as MNPD stepping up and enforcing do a better job at enforcing traffic laws?
You know, I would say that I don't feel entirely comfortable answering that question.
I'm with you.
Mostly because I have also dealt with some situations. And in regard to actually the enforcement. And I think at the end of the day, I want to see justice that's fair. And in regard to people, say, for example, hit and runs, I would like to hold space for those people. We as a group would like to hold space for those people to be able to, if not go through their own healing process and work with them through that, at least apologize. I think in some way, shape, or form, a lot of the times the victims or the families just want to hear an apology. And so being that mediator and having that space, I'd like to see maybe more of a system involved in that in regard to enforcement than anything.
You know, when we talk about the issues, particularly relative to safety in Nashville, pedestrian safety isn't at the top of mind in conversations. A lot of the conversation now is about safety downtown, safety off of Broadway. Have you noticed awareness being raised because of this project? And how would you like Nashvillians to begin talking about this issue?
I think, especially downtown, I mean, we've already had a few fatalities downtown in the last year. And I think with a lot of the work that the city is doing in regard to safety, that eventually there'll be a trickle down. People will start talking about things. I think that at the end of the day, that I would love for people to, if not get involved with, say, for example, Vision Zero, if not get involved with just their own community and going through either the tactical urbanism program or even any of the other programs at the Nashville Department of Safety and multimodal. I'm so sorry I butchered that. I hope Diana doesn't get me. But I really do. People knowing that they have a voice to advocate for the things that they want to see changed in their neighborhoods and in their streets, and getting involved and knowing what's happening. This project is just planting a seed for further understanding and knowledge.
George Michael Jackson is with the Painted Dove Project. I want to thank you for being here and sharing your experience on how pedestrian safety can be improved upon in this city. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to take one more break. When we come back for our final segment, we'll speak with the NDOT Commissioner, Diana Alarcon, about and get an update on Nashville's transportation improvements. Stay with us. This is Nashville. I'm Khalil A. Colonna, and this is Nashville. Today, we've been spending the entire hour speaking with advocates for pedestrian safety. We heard from Joan Kite, who survived a hit and run in 2019. And we heard from someone with the Painted Dove Project that remembers people who didn't survive. Now we'll be in conversation with the Commissioner of the Nashville Department of Transportation, or NDOT, Diana Alarcon. Now, NDOT was established in 2021, and they've been working on traffic and pedestrian safety improvements since that establishment. We want to hear their take on pedestrian safety here in Nashville. Commissioner Alarcon, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to This Is Nashville.
Thank you very much. I appreciate having this opportunity to visit with you.
Really appreciate this. Okay, so tell us this. Why was NDOT founded when it was?
NDOT was founded because it was recognized that there was a transportation element that was actually not being addressed in Metro. And as Davidson County and Nashville was growing, what was not growing was the transportation side of it. So by taking different areas and different departments that were in different, or divisions, I want to say, that were in different departments, they kind of collaborated so there'd be a more direct focus on transportation initiatives for the county as a whole and improving the transportation. So understanding the growth is happening, so how do we continue to make the infrastructure fit with the growth, but also how do we keep it safe? And that's how the department has been working.
Now, some Nashvillians would say that department should have been around a long time ago, but you were established in 2021. How have you all balanced addressing priorities as far as keeping roads safe for pedestrians and drivers?
Well, thank you. That is like our number one mantra over at NDOT is safety is number one. So we have come in, and there is actually what they call a Vision Zero initiative that we have going on. And that is about getting to zero fatalities on our roadway. So we do that by also applying what we call Complete Street. And Mayor O'Connell has been really great in supporting us with our green and with our complete and green stormwater infrastructure Complete Street initiative. He updated the executive order, which allows us to really say, hey, if we're going to build a new street, we're going to build it to the standard that it makes it safe for whatever facility we use. So if we put a sidewalk on the street, we call that a facility. We're going to make sure that facility is safe, that it has treescaped, and that a pedestrian is going to be able to move comfortably on it. If we're going to put a bike lane on the street, we're going to build that facility so it's safe, and a person on a bicycle is going to feel comfortable and safe connecting in that bike lane to a bikeway. If it is a car, we're going to build it safe so that a car can move and get to point A to point B and as little traffic as possible. And I kind of put a quote around that you can see and the community cannot. But I quote it because we're growing, but the infrastructure didn't grow as quick as the growth of our community has. And then, of course, we have transit, which right now with Choose How You Move, we're able to really put a high focus on it and making sure that when we are using transit, we're creating a very safe road and an avenue for transit, because a typical transit person starts with their feet and ends with their feet. So how do we make that safety happen from a transit perspective as well?
You are working in concert with WeGo? Because
yes, sir.
We've had episodes on where people talked about having to walk a long way before they get to the actual bus stop. which has no protection. It's just a sign.
Correct. And so we're super excited about Choose How You Move is really going to allow us to put some emphasis. It actually has 84 miles of sidewalks that are being dedicated that we're going to be building. And those are sidewalks that will connect to transit. So making sure that the community or that neighborhood has a direct sidewalk, a safe sidewalk in which it directs to the bus stop. And that we're building out these bus shelters so folks have these safe shelters that are built away, but providing also all of the modes possible. So bike racks for your bike, maybe even scooters, maybe even a bike sharing program, which we're looking to expand at the moment. So it's really giving people that safe space and using the road for all the modes and not just for the car.
84 miles of new sidewalks.
Yes.
Who's getting them first?
Well, that's going to be a lot of folks are going to get new sidewalks because it'll be as we move forward through the program. So it's including sidewalks that are part of our all access corridors, which are, we have identified 9 of them in this Choose How You Move program. And then we have complete streets. We have over 39 complete street projects that have been identified. And then on top of that, sidewalks. So really looking at where we are looking to improve transit. Add new cross transit. We will be building sidewalks off of those lines so that into neighborhoods so that folks can actually have a safe path to travel from their neighborhood to the transit stop.
Can you give us an estimated timeline for completion? Because I just know as a listener, you know, I'm separating myself from being in the chair. I'm listening. I hear new sidewalks. Okay, yes, please, and thank you. When and where? So
the Choose How You Move program is a 30-year program, and, the community actually supported it. 2/3 of our community said, yes, we want this program. So we are very appreciative of the community, and I know we are, and we're super excited about being able to build this great service for WeGo. But the mayor is challenging us right now to get it done in 15 years. And that's a very aggressive schedule, I have to say. In the transportation world, because we're going to need partners at the state and also partners at the federal level to help us get it done. And so that's going to require a lot of work in that negotiation as well as collaboration. But this is what every city does, and this is what every growing city does.
15 years, so...
Yeah, which is really aggressive because a typical transportation project, just one on its own, is a 15-year project from time of starting the conversation with the community about what they want to what you actually, when you start turning dirt and completing, it's usually a 15-year time frame. So the fact that we're going to be doing 9, all-access corridors, looking at 39 complete street projects, the sidewalks, bike lanes are included in this, transit stops, adding new park and rides as well as some transit centers. This and a brand new bus facility as well for WeGo, because if we're growing, we got to make sure that we're supporting and giving WeGo the resources. That's a very aggressive timeline that you're talking about in 15 years. But the mayor's challenged us, and we're all up for it.
But patience is key from Nashville.
Yes, and I think the mayor's approaching this where we're putting together a community advisory board that will also be there to help us and be part of having that conversation with the community. But also the mayor is really set on making sure that we're constantly communicating with the community on what we're doing. So a couple weeks ago, his office actually put out some of the things that are coming up that we're working on. So some new sidewalks. We're working on signals right now. So we've kind of looked at, hey, we can improve some safety elements from a signal aspect by making the signals work better, put them into real time so that cars can move safely at the speed limit, which protects the bicyclist and the pedestrian and the transit user by having the cars move at the rate that they should based on the speed limit established on that street. And you fix the signals, that person can get from point A to point B quicker if they follow the speed limit than trying to do something above the speed limit.
Are those the hawk lights that I've heard a lot about?
No, but I love the hawk lights. So our hawk lights are actually high-intensity crosswalks that are a priority for the pedestrian or bicyclist. And what they do is when the pedestrian or the bicyclist actually hits it, it starts flashing a red light, which tells the motorist they need to stop. And then it goes solid red. And it gives total priority for the pedestrian or the bicyclist to cross the road. And then it'll start blinking. And if that crosswalk is empty, then the cars can begin moving. So it's not tied with any signalization. And it really goes where you have high intensity pedestrian and bicyclist activity happening. So, but they are kind of new to us, but we actually have one out on Dickerson, which we are super excited about, and we're starting to build more and more of them.
Even though I've heard a lot about Market Square in Knoxville. It's got like pedestrian only areas. Can that exist in Nashville? Will that exist in our city?
There is a potential. It requires a lot of density and commercial to be existing, and it requires a lot of planning because you still want to make sure that you're providing means for people to get there other than just by foot. You want to make sure you're giving means for people to have a place to park. You want to make sure that transit's coming to it. You want to make sure you have a really built-out great bicycle facility as well. So it does work, but there is a lot of thought that needs to go into making it successful year over year.
Is there one single priority that you all have at NDOT that's a little bit higher than the others?
Yes, we do. Pedestrian and bicycle safety through our Vision Zero effort is one of our high priorities. Through the Vision Zero effort, we've identified our high injury network, and that's where we've had our most vulnerable users, which is our pedestrian and our bicyclists, injured, identified. And so we do focus on our high injury network first. We have prioritized them. And that also ties in with transit as well, because we want to make sure if someone is getting off the bus, they're able to cross safely. And so that's where we're putting our focus. And we do that through many different ways. Some of it is through leading pedestrian intervals, which is basically giving the priority of a pedestrian signal to the pedestrian and the bicyclist at an intersection and not necessarily to the car. And that's mainly through our high injury network. It's also looking at maybe adding a hawk because there is a higher number of pedestrians. It's looking at maybe reducing the crossing of the road so it's not as far for a pedestrian and a bicyclist to cross. But we do prioritize the most vulnerable user of our roadway network right now, which is our pedestrian and bicyclists.
Have you all been really talking with MNPD about enforcement of traffic rules and traffic laws?
We have, and we work very closely with them. They are a partner with us in Vision Zero. Vision Zero is made up of 5 E's. So you have engineering, which is how you design the road. You have evaluation, which is how the road is working. I just want to, real quick, I'm going to get to one of the E's, which is enforcement, which is why MNPD is such an important partner of ours. But we recently received a SMART grant through the USDOT, which allowed us to use LiDAR, which is a system where it identifies movement without any facial or nothing. It's like sticks on a graph, but it outlines what a car would look like in a bus and a truck and a pedestrian and a bicyclist. And it allows us to identify near misses. So when we go to design roads, we can do it better because we know where those near misses possibilities are. And in the past, we didn't have that tool, and now we do. And it's been very successful. And we just got awarded the second phase of that, where we are actually looking to employ that out on Nolensville, being that that's one of our high injury networks. So I talked about evaluation, and that's where the SMART grant came in. And I talked about engineering, which is the design of the roads, and that's our Complete Street initiative. Then we also have education, which is, talked about first about the rules of the road. We're back out educating people on the rules of the road. And it's also about encouragement, and that's where we work with some of our nonprofit organizations, such as Walk Bike, with Open Streets, and some other initiatives, such as Safe Routes to School. Again, giving that comfort of encouraging people to use these facilities and how to use them correctly. And then, of course, the last one is enforcement, which is where our collaboration and coordination with the police department is so important and so essential. Unfortunately, you do have to have enforcement. And so they have stepped up enforcement, especially on our pikes where we're seeing a lot of speed, and helping us with getting folks back down to it. But it takes everything. You can't do one of the E's without the other. You have to be doing all of them.
The pikes in Nashville are state-owned. We're talking about Dickerson, Murfreesboro, Gallatin Pike. How will improvements occur on each of them, given the fact that the county has to work, and you all have to work with the state to make these improvements
So
happen?
I have to say kudos to the state. They've been really great partners with us. We've made a lot of improvements. So out on Nolensville, we actually have bike lanes out there, and they've been very receptive to these ideas of putting other facilities on there and the use of the road in that capacity, and then also making them, what we call protected bike lanes. they are on board with that. They're on board with our transit initiatives. I mean, the state was really good in their Modernization Act, including a component where transit will be able to use the choice lanes without any costs associated with it, so that we can also look at a regional approach versus it being someone has to get in a car and come from Williamson County up to Davidson County. They may have an opportunity in the very near future to do it through transit, through this choice lane. So there's a lot of great things that are happening to give people choices, as well as improving it from a safety aspect.
Diana Alarcon is the commissioner of the Nashville Department of Transportation. Commissioner, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate what you're doing.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. Thanks to you for tuning in this hour. This is Nashville is a production of Nashville Public Radio. Today's episode was produced by Josh Deepan. It was directed by Tasha A.F. Lemley. Our board operators, Liv Lombardi. The masterminds behind our theme music are LaRange and Namir Blade. You can listen back at thisisnashville.org or wherever you get good podcasts. And the conversation doesn't end here. Comment and tell us what you want to hear on the show by leaving us a message, 615-751-2500. You can find us on the socials, Blue Sky, Instagram, and X at This Is Nashville. This is Nashville. I'm Khalil A. Colonna. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody. And be good to each other.